Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. So let's knock this out. First question, giving it another shot. Do you find the overhead press and or other pressing variations necessary for optimal shoulder health? Rippetoe says it's the best exercise for strengthening the rotator cuff when done correctly, shrugging at the top of the movement, and hypertrophy. Yeah, overhead pressing, I personally like behind the neck presses, but that's a whole different animal. Yeah, overhead pressing, I think, is actually quite helpful for shoulder health. It's one of your basic movements of the body. They just need to be done carefully and correctly. You need to use certain techniques and forms. But in terms of just increasing your overall shoulder girdle development, and particularly for maintaining shoulder health through all of your proper ranges of motion and planes of motion, yeah, overhead pressing, I think, is almost a requirement. Now, some of it can strengthen your rotator cuffs, but I wouldn't use it exclusively. I do like face pulls for that. I think combining various overhead pressing and face pulls together, though, should give most people pretty well-rounded shoulder development. And it's something I've started doing both of every single session that I train now. I've started doing both overhead pressing and face pulls again because I know that for me, my shoulder development is lagging. It is probably one of the reasons I actually don't look as big as I actually am, is my lack of shoulder development. So hopefully I can sort that out myself. And just for overall function, it's a good idea to incorporate both of those things. All right, next question. Follistatin 344 thoughts. Could it, does it work, or is it bollocks? He's going to be British using bollocks there. All right, guys, myostatin inhibitors, I think these are a dead end for a number of reasons. First of all, let's just deal with the follistatin itself. I don't know any one person who got good results off of it. I don't know anyone who got anywhere near the same results off of it. They've gotten off more conventional drugs. And myostatin is going to have a lot of risk of health issues. You're taking a drug that's going to have potential complications and health risks that we don't fully understand. It gives lesser results than the other drugs that are already out there. So it's kind of a miss in my opinion. And part of the reasons for it, let's assume you could even do it. Humans have a lot less myostatin than a lot of these animals we study. I know people look at the Belgian bulls and then we take these myostatin deficient mice, but you got to remember these animals produce a lot more myostatin than we do. So reducing our amount of myostatin is not going to make as big of a difference. And for those who don't know, myostatin is kind of a substance in your body that inhibits your ability to gain muscle because you don't want to gain muscle too quickly because of the metabolic issues around it. Humans don't have as much of it as a lot of these other animals. So it's something that's not being factored in. And the other thing are the health risks around it and even the potential for injury. We also know that all these myostatin deficient mice we do the studies on end up having very brittle and weak connective tissue. And oftentimes their muscles become too strong for their connective tissue and they have a high rate of injury. So you're dealing with something that can potentially damage your connective tissue in theory on top of all of it. So for now, it just seems to be a dead end. And again, I don't know anybody who's getting good results off of it anyway. So I would leave it alone for now. All right, next question. You said enhanced bodybuilders really hammer a given muscle with a very high volumes and only train them once a week because they can. But wouldn't it be better if they actually trained with high frequency instead? All right, remember guys, by enhanced bodybuilders, we're talking about guys who are on very large amounts of drugs, not just guys who use a little bit of test or debol. The issue there is that maybe not. In theory, yes, they would probably get slightly better results with higher frequency, and some of your top IFBB guys have gone to training each body part twice a week. In fact, we know Arnold did everything 3 times a week, all through his competitive career. But the thing is, with a lot of these guys, because they're using so many drugs, and because they're generally genetically elite as far as gaining muscle and body composition in response to drugs, that's kind of what makes someone a pro bodybuilder genetically, that it may not really matter how they train so much. Their actual training style may not make a significant difference at that point. As long as they train hard enough to stimulate growth and everything, most of these guys are going to get really big and you're not going to see much difference based upon their training style. So the answer is no, it probably wouldn't matter at that threshold. When you're genetically elite, you have a genetically elite response to drugs, you're using very high dose combination cocktail of anabolic drugs. In that situation, as long as they're training hard, they're probably going to get maximum results anyways. All right, next question. Does anterior pelvic tilt cause the lower back to fatigue easier, therefore increasing chances of injury? This is subject to a lot of debate. You're going to see strength coaches in both areas who are going to argue for and against this. So it really makes it hard for you to get a clear answer. My opinion, I think it might slightly increase chance of injury, but as long as your core and lower back are strong, it's unlikely to, unless you're using really bad technique on your lifts. But if you're squatting deep enough, virtually everyone is going to get some sort of pelvic tilt going on if they're squatting very deep, no matter what, once you reach a certain threshold. And again, it comes down to, are you maintaining good technique overall? If your core and spinal erectors are strong enough, this is unlikely to really be a real issue. Maybe for beginners early on who are first starting out, but someone who's been lifting a little while, no, not a big deal. Now, if you're starting out early on, you should probably just work on your mobility a little more and strengthen your core if you're really concerned about this sort of thing, if you're wanting to squat really deep and you're concerned about this. All right, next question. Is there any peptide that will aid in illness such as celiac disease for inflammation of the gut? I read that BPC 157 is a small side effect as such. Is there something more potent? Current medical treatment isn't an option right now. All right, no, as far as I know, peptides aren't going to help you with this. The best thing you can do for inflammation of your gut with celiac is avoid gluten. You have to avoid gluten. The only other thing to look at would be conventional medical treatments. Now, a lot of people who have any sort of muscle wasting disease like that, they generally find, at least in America, they prescribe them nandrolone. HIV patients have done well with it. I knew a guy years ago who had AIDS and celiac, and nandrolone worked wonders for him, but that was under prescription under the care of a doctor. So if you can't really afford anything like that right now, a current medical treatment, I don't know what to tell you there other than you need to be very careful and avoid all gluten in your diet. And in fact, if you have a disease like that, it's probably not worth you risking any sort of refined or processed food because you don't always know if you're going to get gluten in there. Be very careful of that. Go on more of a whole foods type diet and just try to regain weight the best you can. But the inflammation of the gut is caused by your actual diet with that, and you have to be careful of that or it could end up killing you. And I don't want people to think I'm anti-gluten there because the anti-gluten thing has been overblown. It's stupid, but for people who have actual celiac disease, yeah, gluten is a real threat, and it can be actually life-threatening and deadly to them. All right, next question. Are compression cuffs for irritated elbows bullshit? Yes, they are. With something like that, with a compression cuff, you're basically trying to put a Band-Aid over an injury instead of actually fixing what's causing it. The compression cuffs like that might temporarily reduce the pain that you're getting while training from an elbow issue, but if you're still doing the style of training that is inducing the elbow pain and causing the inflammation, you're just going to continue to make the problem worse. It's just going to get worse and worse, even if you're using the compression cuffs. So no, it's not a solution. It's a Band-Aid fix, and it's a bad one. You need to look at what you're doing with your tricep training. I've got various videos on this showing what sort of things cause the elbow pain and tricep inflammation issues. It's generally the way in which you're doing your lifts, or training too hard with too much volume and not taking proper deloads to let that connective tissue heal and the inflammation to go down. The compression cuffs are a Band-Aid fix that aren't going to solve the problem. All right, next question. I have been doing your 5x5 program for about 5 weeks, and I am finding I'm already stalling. Squat is about 155, dead 165, bench 115. That's actually pretty good 5 weeks in. And I'm finding I'm just getting weaker. I'm trying to eat as much as I can, and I've noticed that my squat is declining. Is it possible I'm just not able to recover fast enough? Should I be looking at my diet more? I don't really know what to do. All right, you need to keep in mind that the novice program is a maximum development program, and it's not for everyone. It's a lot of volume. That's why I also have the linear hypertrophy program. If you find that it could be an issue of sleep, it could be an issue of diet, you might not be eating enough, you might be nutrient deficient, you might not be getting enough sleep. This could also be a sign that you have other health problems. Have you gone and gotten a physical? If you find that your strength is declining and you know that you're eating enough, you're getting enough sleep on a program like that, I would say that that's a sign that there's something else going on with the recovery ability of your body. Maybe you should go in to see a medical doctor, get a checkup, and just make sure that everything is okay with you, rather than just assume it is. Because a program like this is for healthy people, and if you really aren't healthy and you have some underlying medical issues, they're going to start becoming a problem. You will possibly start to notice them. That's a good sign to maybe just go to a doctor and get everything checked out just to be safe. Now, failing all of that, if you just find you're struggling and spinning your wheels on this program no matter what, consider going over to my linear hypertrophy program. I have it out there as an alternative for a reason. All right, next question. Why fat loading for endurance events instead of carb loading? All right, pretty simple. Fat is a slower digesting energy source. It can sustain energy longer, both in terms of how much you can hold in the GI tract and absorb it, but the other big factor is energy stores. Your body can only hold so many calories of carbohydrates. Virtually any endurance event, if it's pushed out over several hours, is going to, particularly a marathon or anything, is going to eat far further into your energy reserves and calories than you can actually hold in terms of glycogen in your GI tract and glycogen in your muscle tissue and liver. You're going to completely deplete them. Whereas in your body has a far more infinite ability to store fat. It can hold a lot more fat calories and utilize them longer for an endurance event. And remember, most endurance events, your body, the muscles that are being worked in that sort of range can generally burn fat very efficiently, almost exclusively as a fuel source. So fat loading before an event will keep plenty of fat in your GI tract, plenty of triglyceride stores going, and it should be perfectly fine. And then that's one reason people who do endurance events oftentimes want a little bit of body fat left, because they're going to need a fuel source to tap into during the actual event. Because in some endurance events, you might actually cut 3,000 or 4,000 calories into your actual body fat stores when everything else is depleted, which could be up to a pound of body fat lost during that event on top of everything that you ate. So fat is just a very efficient fuel source for endurance events, and that's why. Remember, carbohydrates, you're going to have a limited capacity to store them. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.